All right. Good evening, everybody. We are live right here at O'Krentz Floors, right here in San Antonio. We've got a live group of wonderful listeners and tellers. And we also have some wonderful tellers that are on Zoom, which is fabulous. And we'd love to see each and every one of you. My name is Sue Kuntz, and I'm the president of the San Antonio Storytellers Association. And we meet the very first Wednesday of each month. Recently, as many of you know, we started this hybrid session where we're telling live, but we're also allowing folks from all over, doesn't have to just be the United States, but from all over to share a story. So tell your friends, let them know. We'd love to see them. If they're practicing a tale, wanting to try to tell a tale before the Halloween gathering in October, this is a perfect venue for that. We're a very welcoming group, and we'd love to have each and every one of you. So with that said, we have some tellers tonight. I'm so excited, both on Zoom and live. And I'd like to start off with one of our tellers. This is her first time to be joining us. She actually attended one of the San Antonio Storytellers storytelling sessions that we had 2 summers ago. And she's multi-talented. She's now a storyteller, but also she's a writer, and she loves reading, and she loves weaving, and loves wonderful 1970s and 60s music. Just right up my alley. I'd like to introduce to you Violeta Garza, and I believe she has a poem to share. Come on up here. And by the way, I'm transferring this mic to each one of our tellers. We're hoping this microphone will be a little bit easier for the listening ear.
Hi, everyone. My name is Violeta, and I want to tell you a little bit about my journey when I go grocery shopping at my neighborhood H-E-B on Tuesday mornings, because if you go between the hours of 8 and 2 a.m. the next day, too many people, and it's too hot, right? So I feel like I'm the one who has to go early in the morning to get the kibble for my baby girl, my baby kitty, and also, of course, food for myself. But I have to steel myself a little bit before I go into the H-E-B, because H-E-B likes to play with my emotions. And I'm not talking about the produce. I'm not even talking about the prices. I'm talking about the playlist. The music that they play at H-E-B when you're already in the store, they already have your money, and they're playing club music at 6:30 in the morning. It's still dark outside. I'm barely waking up. You walk in and it's like, oonch, 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 oonch. And I'm like, H-E-B, why are you doing this to me? I've got my little list, and I gotta go. But sometimes I wonder if the playlist is AI generated, because I think that once it saw me roll my eyes, it switched gears, and the playlist all of a sudden started playing 90s singer, songwriter, Lilith Fair kind of music. And I'm in the produce aisle with the kale, reliving the 90s, you know, and I'm the female empowerment. I'm like, I'm ready. I'm picking out my limes and my watermelon for one, because I'm not going to share my watermelon with my baby girl. So I'm like, okay, H-E-B, you got me back on track. Okay, I love you, I love you, I love you. And I'm about to pick up the last thing on my list. The last thing on my list is corn tortillas, which happen to be in the aisle with the tortillas, the bread, and the sugar pills for kids, as in breakfast cereal. And I'm about to grab the last thing on my list when I hear it. It's a 90s boy band love anthem, kind of generic. You probably know it. I don't know if I can really sing it from a copyright perspective, but it starts with, I don't care where you're from, what you did back in the day. So long as you love me now, it's what matters. The past is gone kind of song. I think you know which song I'm talking about. And I'm about to like rage throw my tortillas into my basket because it's taking me back to a time where I'm like, what do you mean, baby boys? Like, it doesn't matter what you did back in the day. I think it absolutely matters. It absolutely matters. We've all had eras that we'd rather forget. And we are all, I believe, trying to be better people. But I think it does matter. Who you were informs who you are now, and it informs who you're going to be, how you treat the ones you love. It informs your definition of love. It also informs how you order a glass of water from a stranger at the restaurant. I think it absolutely matters. So I'm getting all worked up at the HEB. It's like 6:45. I just want to get out of there. And in my mind, I'm inventing a time machine so I can commando my way back to the 90s and get these songwriters to write different kind of songs. And then I realized, okay, it's not about the boy bands. It's not about the songwriters. It's not even about HEB. It's about me having compassion for that time in my life when I believed that love conquered all. And if you believe that, that's fine. My journey has taught me differently. I feel like that love conquers all banner makes some of us have romantic relationships that are less than healthy. So I'm trying to backtrack this whole story in my mind. And it doesn't help that the song is so catchy. You know what I mean? Like I'm like about to check out and I'm like singing along to it, but I'm like trying to resist it until I found a loophole. I found a loophole in the 90s love anthem from this boy band when I realized I could sing the song from myself to myself. If I sang the song from myself to myself, then yeah, it doesn't matter where I'm from, what I did, as long as I love me, because then I get to love me and I get to have compassion for myself. So I feel all accomplished, you know, as I'm like driving home and singing this, you know, song that's kind of peppy and kind of chipper, and I feel like I've found something that makes me feel like, okay, I'm ready. You know, I'm doing good work. I'm being compassionate for myself. I'm doing all the things. I'm putting myself first. Yes. And then I go home and I feed my cat first. My name is Violeta. Thank you so much. That's my first time. It's my first time. Please be gentle. Please be gentle. Thank you.
Oh, you were amazing. Thank you so much. And right now we have some folks coming in. So we have this huge table, those of you who are on Zoom. It's a wonderful conference table, but it is huge. It is the elephant in the room. So there's really just one way to go to get to the other side of the table. There's got to be a story in there somewhere. But Violeta, that was amazing. Thank you so much. Our next teller is actually on Zoom, and she's actually, I understand, Elizabeth, that you are getting ready for a cold front, like it's coming down to the 90s.
Come on.
Yay for
Come
Elizabeth.
on.
But we're not. It's still in the hundreds here, but we're breaking all kinds of records. Yay, where's our medal? Over 70 days of 100 plus. Oh. I know these stories are so cool for all of us that you'll just take us away to a wonderful place where we're not thinking of the heat at all. Those of you who do not know Elizabeth Beeman, she's from Justin, Texas, a little bit further north than us. And she's a retired librarian, but what she is just an amazing human being with fabulous stories. So Elizabeth, take it away.
Summertime and the living is easy. Fish are jumping and the cotton is high. My parents were up to something. It was the end of May, and they were giggling, and it was 1967, and they kept smiling and giggling and smiling and giggling, and we were all curious. There were six of us, and five of us really cared, and I was about 15 years old. We just kept saying, "What's going on?" We were waiting for them to tell us. And finally, the first week of June, they said, "We're going on vacation." We are? No, you aren't. We are. We're, we're, I was the oldest of six children. I said, "I'm not old enough to take care of all the boys and the girl. I can't do it, Mom. I can't, you can't leave me." She said, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. Your grandma's going to come and stay with you. It'll be wonderful." We were so excited. We love our grandma. And, but then we said, "But what about the garden?" Like my song said about the cotton is high, well, our corn was high, and the tomatoes were doing a bumper crop, and they were probably coming ripening right about when they were leaving. And my mama said, "Oh, don't worry, your grandma will know what to do." And we said, "Well, all right." And so the day came that they got in the station wagon. All of us got in the station wagon, took them to the international airport in Houston, 15 miles away, and they walked across the tarmac, went up into the plane, and my aunt and uncle went with them, and they were off to the Caribbean. And then we drove home. Of course, I didn't drive, but my grandmother did, and we got home, and my grandmother said, "Let's go look at the garden." It really was true. There were tomatoes everywhere. There were peppers. There were potatoes. Oh, we started picking those tomatoes, and we had so many. It wasn't a very large kitchen, but every counter was covered in tomatoes and a few peppers, and then some onions. And we said, "What are we going to do with all these tomatoes?" And my brother Chris said, "Let's make ketchup." Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful? We all thought. My grandma said, "We're not going to make ketchup." And then somebody said, I think Kathy, "Oh, I love spaghetti sauce. Please, Grandma, can we have spaghetti sauce?" We're not having spaghetti sauce. What are we going to do? We have hundreds of tomatoes. What are we going to do? And she said, "We're going to make chili sauce." That didn't sound very good. What is chili sauce? Well, I'll teach you. So she got a great big crock. I wish you could see my arms. It was great big. And she said, "Okay, Elizabeth, I trust you with a knife. You're going to chop up the tomatoes. I'll chop up the onions, and then we'll put a few peppers in, and we'll chop." And so sure enough, we started chop, 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 chop. We chopped all those tomatoes and put in the huge crock. And my grandmother chopped a bunch of onions and then some peppers, and then she salted it. And guess what? She didn't cook it. She stirred it. And she said, "Okay, this is going to be really good." We said, "What about cooking it?" "Oh, we don't need to cook it." She stirred it, and it was left open. And we lived in a home in 1967, no air conditioning in Houston, Texas. Y'all know how hot it gets in Houston, Texas?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it was ever 100 degrees when I was growing up, but it was hot. So all these things started to fly around this crock, and the crock inside, no heat, it started to bubble. And every day, Grandma would stir. We said, "Can we cover it up?" Yeah. And she said, "Sure." So she put some cheesecloth over it. And so for 7 days, this stuff burgled. And then it was time to go get Mom and Dad. And so we got back to the station wagon. We drove to the international airport. We watched them come out of the plane. We saw them just looking so happy, so refreshed. They'd never taken a vacation away from us. And then they got in the car. And then Mom said, "What'd y'all do with all those tomatoes?" And Dad said, "I hope he made ketchup." Chris said, "Nope, no ketchup." And Mom said, "What did you do?" And Kathy said, "I wanted spaghetti sauce." She said, "What did you do?" And Grandma said, "I made chili sauce." My mother said, "I love your chili sauce. When we get home, I'll make a meatloaf, we'll bake potatoes, and we'll have your homemade chili sauce on our meatloaf." Now, I just want you to know, nobody died from that. And I really want to be honest, I didn't try it. And it's not anything I really want to try even today. And that was about, a few years ago. But I just want you to know, when we sat around that table, it was round, and there was 9 of us. We heard these wonderful stories from my parents going on their first vacation by themselves to the Caribbean. And it was a wonderful memory. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing that memory with us. I don't know about you all here. I bet you some of you thought of things that were going on with you and your family back in the day, right? I don't know. I would love to have been there with you, Elizabeth, with all those tomatoes. Oh, and I would have tried that chili on the meatloaf. Oh, yum. And I know Chuck would. Anything that's spicy. Yummy. Thank you so much. We're going to also go with someone who's on Zoom, um, who we love. He's been with us for a long time. Jamie Blunt used to be right here in San Antonio, but he found another state that he loves just as much, probably more at this point, North Carolina. And he's enjoying himself there. But thank goodness he's stuck with us with the San Antonio Storytellers. And he has a story to share tonight. So the stage is yours, Jamie.
Well, thank you, Sue. Some years ago, well, I'll back up. I'm 75 right now. Back when I was about 41, I decided it was time for me to make some major changes in my life, that my life just didn't work anymore the way that it had 10 years before. So what I did was I decided to go to Europe and to go to places that I couldn't have gone to before because of the Iron Curtain. So I bought a ticket and landed in Luxembourg and took a train from Luxembourg over to Germany. I went to former East Germany, East Berlin. It was a real eye-opening experience for me. I never thought I'd ever be able to do that, with the Berlin Wall and East Berlin and West Berlin. I thought, but by God, I was there, and I just couldn't believe my eyes and ears when I was there. So when I was there, I went to a town called Weimar. A very dear friend of mine who since passed away was a scholar of German. He taught German for years, and he said, "You've got to go to Weimar. It's a very important city in Germany." So I went to Weimar. It is a beautiful city. And I saw some sights. And when I was there that night, or one of those nights, I was in the hotel lobby where I stayed. And I got to talking to this guy. And he said, "We're going to go downtown and get some beer. Why don't you come join us?" I said, yeah, sounds like a good idea. So we walked downtown, went to a bar downtown, and we sat down at a table. And some friends of this guy who invited me and sat down, and they drank. And then some more friends came and they drank. And then when it came time to pay the bill, guess who had to pay the bill? The American. I thought, this is probably the oldest trick in the book, lure a foreigner into a bar and set the bar up with all of his friends, and then he gets stuck paying the bill. So anyway, I paid it reluctantly. I shouldn't have done that, but I didn't quite know how to wiggle out of it. So I paid the bill and went home to the hotel. The next morning, that fellow who invited me to the bar wanted to talk to me, and I wouldn't have a thing to do with him. I was so angry with him. So anyway, I spent some time in Weimar and went over to Berlin, visited a friend of mine who lives in East Berlin. And I went and saw where the Berlin Wall had been. And then I took a train to Vienna, where I spent some time visiting with some friends in Vienna. And I told them my story, and they said, "Oh yeah, we've heard those stories before." And part of it might be that these East Germans wanted to avenge the discrepancies and the difficulties they had under the Iron Curtain, and they were kind of using you as their scapegoat. So it happened. I wouldn't let it get to you. So anyway, I got out of Vienna and took a train from Vienna to Budapest, Hungary, the capital of Hungary. And I happened to be sitting in a compartment with a man and a woman. He was a man probably in his 60s, and his wife was a woman just about my age. He was a minister in a church in Australia, had fled with his family from Hungary back in 1956. He spent most of his life in Australia, where he was educated and where he became a minister of a church. And his wife, a very beautiful woman, by the way, was his wife, quite a bit younger than he was, but still he had a very, very pleasant conversation, a very nice conversation. And I just remember talking about the way things had changed. And this man was very curious to be looking out the window and noticing how things in Hungary had changed a lot since he had moved away from there back in 1956. And then as we got closer and closer to Budapest, we thought, well, it might be good to go down and get a cup of coffee in the cafe car. So we did. And we had coffee and, I guess, Danish or something like that. And then when it came time to pay the bill, guess what? They didn't have enough money. And I had told them my story of what happened to me in Weimar, and they were very supportive that, yeah, I was taken advantage of, and that shouldn't have happened, but it did. And then here I was in the cafe car of this train with this couple, and they didn't have enough money to pay their bill. They had Australian money, but they didn't have Hungarian money to pay the bill. So I got stuck paying that bill as well. And I think the wife especially was extremely embarrassed. Her face just turned beet red when this happened. And her husband was just ghost white and speechless. I could tell they were both just embarrassed to their toes. But still, I was fortunate that I had enough money to pay the bill. And I paid the bill, and then we went back to the compartment where we were riding, and we were able to converse and have a civil conversation. But yet the dynamics between us had changed so much, I think they were embarrassed to be sitting in the same railway carriage with me. Well, anyway, we got to Budapest, and I bid them farewell. And I never saw them again. I would like to have seen them again, but I couldn't. So I went to Budapest, spent a few days in Budapest, and had a really good trip. It was one of those seminal moments in my life that I'll never forget. I was just at a point in life where working as an industrial salesman just didn't work anymore. I had to do something different. So what I did was I came home, and then I began waxing nostalgic about my trip in Europe. And I thought, I'd like to go back. I'd like to go back to Europe. I'd like to work there. I really would. So I went down to the embassies in Washington and dropped my name at various places and got job applications, and finally got a job working as a teacher in Hungary, where I taught English as a second language for 2 years at a gymnasium. A gymnasium is a type of a high school throughout much of Europe. So I taught there for 2 years, and really was glad that I did. So anyway, it was a time in my life that changed and changed me. And I'm glad I did it. I really am glad. I know Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, once said, in life, there are 4 major times. They are birth, adolescence, midlife, and death. Well, I don't remember when I was born, of course. Nobody does. But adolescence was a very, very troubling time for me. Very troubling time. I wonder if I'd ever get through it. I was so upset during that time of my life. And then midlife, well, my marriage fell apart. My job became totally meaningless, and I changed courses in midstream and went to work in Europe and took a big cut in salary to work over there. Death. Well, I haven't quite gotten there yet. I'm sure I'm heading in that direction, but I'm sure it'll come eventually. But anyway, what I think is important is that when you live your life, you have to listen to your inner voice, listen to what it's telling you. And I think that's what happened to me when I went to Europe. I just had to go to Europe and experience it. I remember, for example, I was there just after the Berlin Wall had come down, and I tried calling some friends of mine who lived in East Berlin. And I tried and tried and tried and tried and tried to call them, and I just could not get through. So out of desperation, I went to the police in West Berlin. And I told them, I've been trying to call my friends in East Berlin. I cannot get through. What can I do? And they said, well, use one of our telephones. They had a whole bank of telephones there. So I picked up their phone and called them and spoke to them, and I was able to visit with them. Just things like that I really needed to go through. I remember going to Berlin and going to where the Berlin Wall had stood and walking from West Berlin to East Berlin, West Berlin to East Berlin, West Berlin, just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, seeing where the wall had stood and feeling just so totally liberated, never thinking that I'd be able to do such a thing. I remember the Berlin Wall when it went up back in 1961, and the fear, the trepidation, the nervousness that we had about that. What are the Russians going to do? What are the Americans going to do? Are they going to shoot each other? Is it going to lead to a nuclear war? Well, of course it didn't, but the wall went up. And finally, President Kennedy said, a wall is better than a war. I think truer words were never spoken. So anyway, I think that, again, what I'm saying is we all have an inner voice. It's good to listen to it, pay attention to it, and maybe do what it tells you to do. That's what I did, and I'm glad I did. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Jamie. You are the worldly storyteller. And I love the word gymnasium. I don't think I'm going to forget that now. And that has to do with high school. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, the gymnasium. I love that. Many of us have traveled the world, but it's so nice to get a historical perspective on the years that you were there. It's pretty amazing. So thank you so much. Our next storyteller is sitting right next to me on my left, Susan Whipple. And bless her heart, she's been going up and down the elevator or stairs, I'm not sure which. Because she's the one that's actually letting folks in after the hours that Okrent Floors closes. So we love her for doing that, but she's also an amazing storyteller, an amazing grandmother, an amazing gardener, and a phenomenal cook. In fact, we need to start talking about having treats here virtually and truly live here. And we can watch each other eat midway. That would be kind of fun. We'll need to talk about that maybe for the holidays. But Susan, why don't you come on up here and come share your tale?
I'm going to get a jump on Halloween. I know it's not till the end of October, but I have a lot of, I wouldn't say scary stories. Most of them are just creepy. And I enjoy telling them. In fact, I enjoy telling them more than any of the other stories that I have. So that just gives you a heads up. The story I'm about to tell, I actually heard on NPR a long time ago. I had just gotten into the car and I turned it on, and there it was. It had already started. So I give credit to the unknown author. It was New Year's Eve, and I was living in Montana at the time. It was a long time ago. I was at my boyfriend's house. His name was Hank, and we were having a late dinner. I was an EMT, emergency medical technician, on call. Well, at 10 o'clock, I got a page and I had to leave, and I did. And when I got to the scene, the patient was a young boy. He was about 16, but he was very, very big for his age, very good looking. He had green eyes and he had hair down to his shoulder. And he was just big, but he was also having grand mal seizures. Those are the really bad kind. And I took his vital signs, and his heart was racing and his blood pressure was through the roof. And he was in big trouble. But he knew when I got there that he was in trouble, but that I was there to help him. His green eyes were bloodshot, but you know, they were still green and still beautiful. Well, the other EMTs wanted to get him into the ambulance, and it was very difficult because of his seizures. And he was so big also, until somebody finally found a blanket and they wrapped him tightly in it. And then they could put him on the gurney and into the ambulance, and off they went to the hospital. And I followed along. When I got there and parked and got inside, they had already taken blood and sent it up to the lab. They had him on oxygen and they had an IV. People came from all over the hospital to help the ER staff. And they did what they could for him, and I just watched him. And I was there for a very, very long time, and they did whatever they did. The blood tests came back that he had cocaine in his blood. But not only that, there was another substance that they couldn't identify, something unknown. And whatever it was caused him a terrible reaction that put him in this position where he was so sick. Well, I watched and I watched and I stayed there, and I just felt so bad. And finally, at one point, I could tell that even though his body was still alive, his soul had already left. And so I got up and I left too, and I went back to Hank's. It was very, very late, in the wee hours of the morning. Hank was fast asleep, and I tried to sleep, but there was no sleep for me that night. And finally, after tossing and turning, I got up and I got dressed. I got dressed warmly because the weather had turned colder. And I decided to go for a drive because to me that was very relaxing. And I was going to go to Yellowstone Park, which was only a 3-hour trip. So I got in the car and let it warm up and I headed out. And I knew the way. But all I could think about was this boy and how much trouble he was in and how awful it was. And I wondered, I had really been suspicious of Hank, and I thought he may have been dealing drugs. And if it was he who had sold this boy the drugs, then I would have to really reconsider this relationship. But in any event, I went along and I was thinking about all that stuff. And all of a sudden I came to myself and I realized I was on a road that I didn't recognize. I had no idea where I was. In the meantime, the snow had begun to fall just when I left the house, and it kept on getting worse and worse and worse. And it was coming down like crazy. It was causing the tree branches to fall, to go down a little bit. And there were snowdrifts on the road and off the road. And it was a very narrow road, and I'd never seen it before. And I didn't know what to do. I thought, well, maybe I could turn around and just retrace my steps. But the road was so narrow and the snow was so bad and the drifts that I didn't dare do that. So I pondered and pondered, and finally I stopped and I thought, well, I still have half a tank of gas. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the engine and I'm going to sit here and wait till morning, and maybe somebody will come by. There was nobody in sight. There were no farms. There were no houses. There was nothing. I was just by myself. And just about the time that I was about to turn off the engine, I saw a flicker of light in my rearview mirror. And as I looked, I saw it was a truck. It was a great big crew cab pickup, and it was coming right behind me. So I got out of my car and I waved my arms to call attention, and I jumped up and down, and the truck came to within a few feet of me and it stopped. And a man got out. He was tall. He was really a big guy. And he was dressed in jeans and a heavy jacket and a Western hat. He was kind of good looking, but a little weathered. And he had blonde hair down to his shoulders and green eyes. Well, he came out and he started yelling at me. He says, "What are you doing here in the middle of the night? You have to be an idiot to be out here. Don't you know that in this kind of weather, you don't go driving around?" Well, I tried to explain that I was lost and I needed gas and I needed help, and he wasn't listening to me at all. And he kept on ranting and raving. And finally, he said, I don't understand what's the matter with you for being out here. Don't you know that you're not even in Montana anymore? You're in Idaho? Well, by then he had run out of steam and he quieted down. And I did explain that I was lost and I needed gas and I needed directions. And he said, well, I can direct you to a gas station, but you better pay attention to my instructions. I'll follow along and I'll put my hand on the horn and I will tell you which way to go and you better pay attention. But when you get there, the man will not have the station open. It's late at night, but he lives in the house just behind. And if you go and knock on the door, he'll come out and help you. Okay, so we started off. I was very cautious. And every time we came to a turn, he'd sit on that horn and he'd point one way or the other way, whichever way we had to go. But we managed. And sure enough, we got to the gas station. It was down a little slope off the road. And the snow had abated quite a bit. It wasn't as bad as it was. And I pulled up to the pump and I found the house and I knocked on the door and the man said he'd be right out. Well, while I was waiting, I decided to thank my rescuer. So I walked up the slope and I found my tire tracks and I looked for his tire tracks because the truck was not there and he wasn't either. And I didn't see his tire tracks, just mine. Now, I would have seen his because his truck was wider. He had heavier tires with a bigger tread. There were no tire tracks from his truck. I walked down a quarter of a mile one way, I crossed over and I walked down the other way and I looked everywhere, just my own tire tracks. By the time I got back, the guy had finished pumping gas and I paid him and he gave me directions and I started out and I was very careful to follow the directions because I didn't want to get into any more trouble. And sure enough, after a while, I was on a road that had other cars on it. And right after that, I began to recognize the landmarks. So I relaxed a little bit and I began to think of all the things that happened that evening. The young boy with the green eyes who was in such bad trouble, poor thing, and getting lost. And then the man who came to help me, he had those same green eyes. Now, you and I know that green eyes are not all that common. And so I began to think. And what I thought was, maybe this is a coincidence, but maybe also somebody or something is watching out for me. Thank you. Thank you.
That was lovely. Thank you so much, Susan.
Favorite one.
Well, that's our favorite one too. I'm going to scoot over a little bit this way, Chuck, so that, there we go. Okay. I think I'm going to go ahead and share a story, but I'm also going to invite Chester Weems to hopefully share a poem after this. And then we have Nathan to close up our evening. And if there's anybody who would like to also share, do put it in the chat and we'll be able to read that. We had a wonderful member of the San Antonio Storytellers recently pass away. His name is John Munley, and he was one of our board members, but truly a friend to all of us. He used to just visit us half of the year because he'd spend half this year up on the Northeast coast where his family was from. And then he would come on down here with his wife and spend time with us down here in San Antonio. And then eventually he was here pretty much the entire year. And it was so much fun having him as a board member, as a friend, and as a fabulous storyteller. He passed away pretty quickly through cancer, but spent his time with his family the last several months, which was wonderful. But I'd like to honor him. I know he can hear this because, you know, once a storyteller, always a storyteller. So I know if he's listening and not telling a story up in heaven, then he'll hear this. He truly just relished every moment of his life. So many of his stories were of his childhood, growing up with his brothers. But also, he loved telling from his own Irish heritage, and would participate in the Irish Festival up in Dallas, along with our Jane McDaniel, and have so much fun up there too. So I have an Irish tale that I'd like to share. It's a tale I've heard over and over again through our COVID time on Zoom. And I have fallen in love with this tale. I've not heard John tell it, but I suspect if he's listening, he's got a track right up there to share it after it's told here. It's called The One Wish. There was a young man, his name was Seamus, married to his lovely wife of 5 years. But unfortunately, they could not bear any children at that time because they were so poor. And they were living with Seamus's parents, who were quite old. And all of them were quite poor, just trying to survive in this small home that was rented. Times were hard. Seamus's mother was blind, had been blind most of his life growing up. And Seamus's father was bent with worry and hard work from a lifetime of raising potatoes. But if times couldn't be this worse, it came. That year came when the potatoes could not grow anymore. And truly, everyone was starving. Everybody was, of the poor sect. For you see, these huge mansions, oh, and the estates of green, owned by the wealthy families. They were guarded by huge walls, so the peasants would not find their way over those walls. The peasants pretty much had to stay where they were and fetch what they could when they could. And times only got worse. In fact, when it was night and everyone went to sleep, Seamus, he sat down on the hearth and he took the one tool that he had, the axe, and his stone sharpener, and sharpened that axe while thinking what he could possibly do. You could hear the shh, 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 while his brain was thinking. It had to be him who could save the day. Just one small animal is all he needed. A salmon from the river, a deer hopping and running through the woods, a small rabbit in the brush, just one to keep them alive one day longer. And so when day came, Seamus was up early and he took that axe, he placed it in his belt, and he ran out and up over the wall. Now there were bailiffs everywhere. He had to be careful, for if you're caught over that wall where the estates were, you could be exported, you could be hung. And if you took one of their animals, your family would never see you again. Seamus knew this, but there was nothing he could do. So with that axe, he crept very carefully in every direction, trying to find anything that he could bring back with him to his family. And when he thought all hope was gone, there was a small area where the hawthorn trees just shaded him beautifully. And he just took a deep breath. And as he opened up his eyes, it was the hoofs he heard first coming toward him. But when he saw this beautiful, massive white deer, he knew that there was magic to be had. Seamus immediately, he picked up that axe and he was getting ready to throw it right at that white deer. But the white deer spoke. Seamus, put your axe down, for I have one wish to grant you, if you allow me to live. Well, Seamus was shocked. There were no deer that spoke in those days. He knew that magic was at work, and with that axe, he laid it down. And finally, the white deer spoke one more time and said, Seamus, go home. Go home to your family and talk this over with them. See what they want you to do. Come back tomorrow, and I will be here. I will stay if you would like to kill me. I will honor that. Or I can grant you one wish. Well, Seamus, he took that axe and he stuck it back in his belt, and he walked off quickly. And as he was walking back, making sure the bailiffs were not around and getting ready to climb that huge wall again, he thought, what an idiot I am. That massive deer would have served all of us for the winter. Well, he was beside himself. But once he got to his house, there his father was, outside with a hoe, digging what little skins that were available from the old potatoes. And he bent over to his father and he explained to him that he saw this white deer among the hawthorn trees and about the one wish. And his father looked up at Seamus and said, this is our chance. What you need to do is ask for all the gold in the world. It will solve all of our problems, right? It will solve all. Isn't that what gold does? And Seamus nodded his head, and he went over then into the home, into the small cottage to tell his mother. Now, his mother could sense that he was right there. She was sitting on a bucket, and she too, she was sewing as she listened to Seamus come in. And she said, Seamus, come. And she touched his face. And she said, I can tell something amazing has happened. Tell me. Well, of course, Seamus told her everything. And his blind mother looked up at him with her hands and said, Seamus, you must ask that I receive my sight again. For with the sight, it's worth more than all the gold in the world, isn't it? And Seamus, he nodded and gave his mother a big hug, and there his wife was sitting over there by the hearth, warming her hands, but what little fire was left. He sat by her, and she turned and said, Seamus, we were so worried. Where were you? Seamus explained exactly what had happened, seeing that magical white deer and hearing him speak and allowing one wish, or allowing Seamus to kill that deer tomorrow. Well, Seamus's wife looked at Seamus and held both his hands and allowed him to put one hand on her stomach, said, Seamus, it's been 5 years and no baby. You must ask that I have a baby so that our family will continue on, so that they too will be able to tell stories. Yes, and isn't that worth what? All the gold in the world. Yes. Well, Seamus, they had waited 5 years. And Seamus gave his wife a hug. And eventually all went to sleep hungry, except Seamus. Now, he tried to sleep, but if you think he got one wink of sleep, he did not. He got up early and he took that axe and he took that stone to sharpen that axe, and you could hear him if you were there. Shh, shh, shh. And he knew what he must do. He put that axe in his belt, And off he went as the sun rose, as daytime came. He crept over that huge wall. And he was still very careful. He made sure the bailiffs were not around. He hid behind all the bushes. And he eventually came to where that shallow hollow was and where the hawthorn trees grew. And there was a huge white deer. Seamus, you spoke to your family. What have you decided? And all that white deer stood tall and proud, but gave its long neck out to Seamus for his axe. And Seamus held that axe handle, and as he lifted it up, he said, I would like one wish. And down the handle went. Your wish will be granted. Tell me now. Seamus took a deep, deep breath. I wish that my mother could see my wife rocking our new baby in a solid gold cradle. Your wish will be granted. And if you looked hard enough at that white deer, and if white deer had those smiles like dogs do when they know that someone is more clever than they are, that is what he saw. And that white deer with all four hoofs trampled off. Now Seamus, he went home. He climbed that wall. And everything happened eventually. And I've heard that they took some of that money and they sailed on a ship to America. Some say they sailed here to Texas, found a huge ranch. But whatever is said, it is my hope that they lived happily and with no worries for the rest of their lives. Thank you. We love you, John. Those are the type of stories John would tell. Our next poetry reader, possibly totally up to Chester. Chester, would you like to share a poem?
Yes, I appreciate that. Although I hate to follow that, was an excellent story. That was pretty neat. It really was. In fact, I tuned in tonight just because I like hearing you folks. But ego got me, and so I've got something. It's not very good. But I've discovered if you write something and you don't know what it is, just call it a poem. You can get away with it. One of these days, I'm going to figure out how to make words rhyme. But anyway, this is something that I kind of threw together, and it's kind of silly, I guess, but that's okay. I'm kind of silly too. But I do appreciate a couple people made a couple of comments in chats about San Antonio group's kind of neat, and it's nice being belonging to this group. And one of these days, I'm going to come see you guys for real. I just think that'd be kind of neat. Except you're a long ways down there. It won't be in the summertime. Well, anyway, this is a little thing I threw together called the chicken leg. When I was little, out on the farm, I liked to make the chickens dance. The chickens were free range in the yard, and I had a BB gun. I was a good shooter. I was an accurate shooter. I would shoot at their feet. The BB pellets would make them jump, just like in the Western movies. But you had to be a good shooter, which I was. I was a good shooter. So I had my fun, and except for an occasional hop, the chickens could care less. We raised the chickens to eat, of course. Fried chicken with mashed potatoes, gizzards, and big old chicken legs. At the table one day, biting down on this juicy chicken leg, and crunch, I bit on a rock, except it wasn't a rock. It was a BB pellet from a bad shooter. I was eating a wounded chicken, wounded from a bad shooter. Chicken legs have never tasted the same. Guilt is a better shooter. Thank you.
That was perfect. And I'm so sorry you had to go through that. That was amazing, though. Thank you.
Hey, Sue, I want to say one more thing. I went to a national thing one time, and there was a Jewish teller there, really nice older lady, and she talked about how important it was to remember people and to say their names. And I think you made a little contribution to that tonight, and I think that was pretty neat. Just all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Goosebumps. Hey, speaking of San Antonio and how ridiculously hot as Hades it is here, you have an open invitation to come on down here. We have a house down here. Please bring your wife, bring your daughter, and we'll show you the town. It would be, well, if I show you Bulverde, it's a blink and an eye, and then that's it. But we'll show you San Antonio.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet. So our last teller, unless there is someone else who would like to share, going once, going twice. All right. Our last teller is someone who's been with us for quite a while, actually. He's grown up in our San Antonio storytellers. He was a kid. I swear he was a kid. And out of nowhere, he's this handsome young man and still sharing stories with us. He left San Antonio for a while and zoomed in with us. And I understand that Nathan is here in San Antonio again, at least for a while. Yeah. So I'm going to invite Nathan Hollander to come up here and share something cool that something cooler will be happening in October. You'll see what I mean in a moment. So I'm going to let you stand here.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And the Halloween play the Halloween poem I like to tell you is one that you probably may have heard of before. It's called The Slithery D. The slithery D, he came out of the sea. He heard all the others, but he didn't hear me. The slithery D, he came out of the sea. He saw all the others, but he didn't see me. The slithery D, he came out of the sea. He watched all the others, but he didn't watch me. The slithery D, he came out of the sea. He followed all the others, but he didn't follow me. The slithery D, he came out of the sea. He chased all the others, but he didn't chase me. The slithery D, he came out of the sea. He caught all the others, but he didn't catch me. The slithery D, he came out of the sea. He ate all the others, but he didn't eat. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much.
Oh, so you're no longer with us. Awesome. That was fabulous, Nathan.
Thank you so much, Ms. Coons.
Oh, and to be called Miss Coons, it does my heart well. I miss those years of being a teacher. I'd like to thank each and every one of you. And if you wouldn't mind putting us on gallery mode, Chuck, and that way we can all see everybody. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us again for September. October is going to be fun, as you know. We're finishing a little early. So I suspect a lot of us have concerts going on. Who knows? We do have one at Confluence Park, which is a beautiful park south of San Antonio. It's amazing. To me, it's like an amphitheater made out of concrete lily. It's just amazing. And that's where we're going to have our concert starting at 7 p.m. on Saturday, the 28th of October. And we would love for each and every one of you to join us. We're hoping that we can also film it and get other folks to watch it, not through Zoom, but it'll have to be on YouTube. So we'll see. What kind of stories are we telling? Oh, spooky, haunting tales. And we're hoping to have the blood bank there just to add to the atmosphere. So maybe we could bring in more community members who know nothing about stories per se, as in storytelling, but if they're there to give blood, we'll have our own vampires to help out. So there we go. And I don't know if anyone up on Zoom has some concerts going on that could be viewed online. Always let us know, and I will put it on our San Antonio Storytellers Facebook page. So you can always email me, and we can go that way. So does anybody else have anything else you want to add? Okay, I'd like to take pictures of everybody. Everyone stay on Zoom. I'm going to take a picture of you guys really quick, and I'll stop the recording.